there are two churches that celebrate the Annunciation to Mary. The first is the very popular Catholic Church of the Annunciation, which is down the hill from here about 650 meters. This is the other church, the Greek Orthodox Church of St. Gabriel in the city of Nazareth. At this site, we're going to be going through story number 5 of the Merged Gospels, and that is the Annunciation to Mary. Now, why is this called the Church of St. Gabriel? This is because the Archangel Gabriel is the one who spoke to Mary and told her that she would be the mother of the Son of God. And so this church is named after the angel Gabriel. Now, much of the material that we read in the Gospels actually comes to us through Mary, including the account of her Annunciation. If Joseph died before Jesus started his ministry, then it was Mary who must have communicated everything to the early church about her life, her betrothal to Joseph, her virgin birth, Jesus' childhood, and his visit to the temple when he was 12 years old. And there are probably many other parts of the story of Jesus that come directly from her. The Catholic Church of the Annunciation and this Greek Orthodox Church of St. Gabriel are not competing shrines, but rather they complement each other, because the Catholic Church was the site of Mary's home. But this Orthodox Church is the site where Mary first heard the voice of the angel Gabriel. You see, the Church of St. Gabriel is built over a spring, which is nothing more than a trickle of water that appears briefly above ground. In the time of Jesus, this was one of the places where all the townspeople in Nazareth came to get water. If they hadn't collected enough rainwater that they kept in cisterns, this was one of the only places to get it. Now, we know that there was a church here in the early years of Christianity because it was mentioned in the writings of a monk from France named Arculf, who came here in the year 670 AD. This is the first mention of a church at this location. And it's interesting that Arculf describes this church as being built over the house where Jesus grew up. However, it's more likely that Jesus grew up at the archaeological ruins beneath the Sisters of Nazareth Convent, just south of this location. Now, this early church building didn't last forever. It was destroyed by the Persians early in the 7th century. You see, the place that we now call Israel used to be a Christian country between the years 325 and 609 AD. When the Persians came in, they ended all of that, and destroying this church was part of their campaign. But even though they destroyed the church, they didn't destroy the well over which the church was built. Nonetheless, the church was left in ruins until the 12th century, when the Crusaders came in and rebuilt it. That Crusader church only lasted for about 100 years, because there was a Muslim empire from Egypt called the Mamluk Empire, and they destroyed the Crusader church in 1263 AD. Once again, the church was left in ruins for about 500 years, until it was rebuilt again in 1749 AD by the Orthodox community who lived here. And this is the church that exists today. One of the things that always impresses us about the shrines in the Holy Land is the process of going downstairs to view them. Anytime you have to step down to view an ancient site, you know that you are probably going to see something authentic. This is because urban development tends to build up archaeological sites in elevation over time. When you walk down the 4 steps to enter the main church, you are going back in time 300 years. Once you are inside, you will walk down another 7 steps to enter the crypt. And in so doing, you are now descending almost 900 years. And the well at the very end of the crypt dates back to prehistory. As you first enter the main prayer hall of the church, you see that it is beautifully decorated with many frescoes and chandeliers, with warm, bold colors and the fragrance of incense. The most impressive feature of any Orthodox church is the richly decorated iconostasis, or icon wall at the front of the church. This iconostasis separates the general prayer hall from the altar, which is behind the wall. And this is how Orthodox churches are typically built. That means that the main altar is always hidden from the prayer hall that we are now in. Now, I just used two words that may be unfamiliar to you: icon and fresco. An icon is a picture. You hang it on a wall. A fresco is painted directly onto the plaster on the wall. Now, what is an icon, and what are they used for? Well, an icon in the Orthodox Church is much the same thing as an icon on your computer screen. An icon on your computer is something that stands in the place of something else. It's just a picture, but it represents a file that is somewhere on that computer. And that's what an icon is in an Orthodox church. It's generally a picture of a person or a biblical scene, but the icon is not the person. It merely represents the person. It would be like someone putting a picture of Jesus on their wall and praying while facing that picture, where they would use that picture to help them visualize Jesus, to concentrate on Him. And that's what an icon is. People don't pray to the icon. They merely reflect on what it represents. Now, it's not just the icons that are symbolic. There is symbolism even in the way that the church is constructed. I mentioned that the icons are put on a wall called an iconostasis, behind which is the main altar. The altar is a place where only the priests are allowed to go. Now, what does all this mean? The main altar is symbolic of heaven, and it is the Orthodox priest who represents the church to God. He does this just like the priest used to do in the Jewish temple sanctuary and in the Holy of Holies. And the iconostasis represents our current separation from heaven. In other words, the area of the main church represents the believers on earth, and the altar behind this wall represents paradise. The iconostasis is the wall that separates the two of them. The icons on this stand represent the people and the events that give us our earthly connection to heaven. Prayers are made by the Orthodox believers to heaven through and with the cooperation of those saints whose pictures are on this stand. According to both Catholic and Orthodox churches, each one of these departed saints is in heaven at this moment. And in the Catholic and Orthodox churches, the faithful congregation members can and do pray for their assistance, and they seek the participation of these departed saints in their petitions to God Himself, since these saints have left earth, and they are now sitting in God's presence for all eternity. Protestants don't make it a point of praying to or through saints, but this is a common and encouraged practice in the Orthodox Church. Now, I told you that the aisle that goes through the center of the crypt dates back to the Crusader era. It is decorated with mosaic tiles, and it leads to an ancient well of Nazareth, and this is where the first part of the Annunciation of Mary took place. In fact, the walls in this hallway have Arabic writing that says, "The Annunciation to the Virgin Mary, nearby the spring." Now you may ask, why do we believe that the Annunciation started here when there is a big Catholic church down the street that covers the traditional home of Mary? The reason is because history tells us that the Annunciation took place in two parts. The first part was in this church, and the second part was in the Catholic Church. What the Proto-Evangelium of James says is that Mary first encountered the angel while she was fetching water from the spring that is now under this church. At that moment, she heard a voice saying, "Hail, you who have received grace. The Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women." This startled Mary, and she went back to her home, at which time the annunciation of the angel continued. Now, if all of that is true, it means that you are standing in a biblical site, and that the Annunciation to Mary took place in two parts, the first part being here, and the second part at the Catholic Church of the Annunciation. But there is something else. When you are in the corridor of the crypt, you are within the 3-foot circle of both Mary and probably Jesus as well, since he lived in Nazareth for 27 years of his life, and he was probably here many times, fetching water in the very same place where you were just standing.